Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. will be returning to the court. Nikola Jokic, the back-to-back MVP, is locked up to the biggest contract in NBA history, and some valuable depth and defense has been added during the offseason. But is it enough for the Nuggets to be title contenders next season? Nikola Jokic, the best center in the NBA, the back-to-back defending MVP, and now the recipient of the biggest contract in NBA history, and he is deserving of every single penny. This extension keeps Jokic under team control through the 2026-27 season, with a player option for the 2027-28 season, which will be roughly worth $60 million. So I'm pretty sure he'll pick it up. But the Jokic extension was expected. It was important, but it was not any bit of a surprise. So what did the Nuggets do to improve the team around him? With regards to free agency, they signed Bruce Brown, and let me tell you, I absolutely love this signing for the Nuggets. Now, slight bias, I do just love Bruce Brown as a player, but he is a very impactful player to have. He is the type of player you want around to make the winning plays. He works hard, he defends well, he gets on the floor for loose balls, he makes the extra passes to the open man, sets hard screens, rolls well to the basket, cuts hard to the basket, you name it, he makes the hard work, hustle type plays. He can make those small plays that can be the difference in close games, especially in the playoffs. He's the type of guy that you want on your team and that you hate to play against. Bruce Brown is signed for the next 2 seasons, with the 2023-24 season being a player option, and I would expect he is a very valuable member of the Nuggets rotation throughout this contract, whether he plays more at the 2 or at the 3. But most importantly, he is a great defensive piece, whether that be as a guard or as a wing, that will significantly improve the defensive quality of this team. Speaking of wing defense, caldwell-pope was added to the roster via a trade from the Wizards, with Will Barton and Monte Morris heading to Washington. Over the last few years, one of the biggest weaknesses of the Nuggets has been wing depth, quality, and specifically wing defense. Whilst there are certainly still some concerns with their wing defense, specifically with regards to MPJ, but adding Bruce Brown certainly helps address those concerns, and KCP will also be a significant improvement in that area. Not to mention the fact that KCP adds more great three-point shooting and spacing around Nikola Jokic, which just allows for a bit more space for him to pick apart the defense, and a bit more space for Jamal Murray to operate whilst having a knockdown catch-and-shoot three-point shooter if the defense sags off of KCP. These additions were great under-the-radar acquisitions to improve key areas of weakness on this roster, while adding players that have proven to have a winning impact, make these small hustle plays that make a difference, and that can be the deciding factors when it really matters. But that's not to say there still isn't some concerns regarding the Nuggets roster. So how good truly are the Denver Nuggets headed into next season? At this point, we all know the value and impact of Nikola Jokic. He is a superstar and is the biggest reason why this Nuggets roster is as good as they are. Although some of you still seem to think that Jokic is a terrible defender, which he isn't. He is not an elite defensive center, but he is arguably an above average center on the defensive end of the floor now. So let's just set that straight. But let's focus on the pieces around him, the strengths and the concerns. Starting with point guard Jamal Murray. Let's not forget how good Murray has been throughout his young career, and the fact that before his injury he was considered one of the most promising young point guards in the NBA. The biggest concern with Jamal is how well he will return from injury. He has had a lengthy recovery process, and that rehab in combination with the lack of professional basketball over the last 18 months could cause some physical setbacks, and more importantly, some significant mental roadblocks to work through as he gets back to playing this season. Murray will be great to have back for the Nuggets and for the league as a whole, but it could be a return with gradual reintroduction back to his prior role and level of production, and how good he ends up being by the end of the season will play a significant part in how good the Nuggets can be in the postseason. Similar thoughts can be echoed for Michael Porter Jr., who is recovering from yet another back injury, and I can only imagine how frustrated he is as he continues to struggle with back injuries throughout his young basketball career. And in turn, there has to be significant mental hurdles he will have to get through to get back onto the court and play confidently and without fear of another back injury. Now, there is no doubt that the upside is still high for MPJ. He is a great scorer with elite scoring upside, and was one of the favorites for most improved player last season for a reason before his poor start and eventual injury. Assuming the start to last season was just a bump in the road, if healthy, MPJ is a great scoring wing, especially considering he is the third scoring option on this team. But his health is a major concern, especially when considering his history of back injuries and how difficult back injuries are to truly make full recoveries from. The Nuggets have had a big shakeup with regards to their complementary pieces around Jokic, Murray, and MPJ. We've already discussed the additions of Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown, who will serve very good bench or starting roles. KCP I expect to start at the 2, and Bruce Brown to fill in bench roles at the 2 and at the 3. Both will provide very good defense and are just good winning impact players, as previously mentioned. But with Will Barton and Monte Morris out of town, what does the bench guard rotation look like? Well, it honestly shouldn't look much different than last year. You expected Monte Morris to step back into the backup point guard role, but now Bones Hyland will simply continue to be the full-time backup point guard after having a great rookie season, while Ish Smith will provide some level of veteran cover at that role. But expect Hyland to be leading the way, with Smith potentially seeing some minutes in 2 point guard lineups off of the bench if the Nuggets don't add another 2 or 3 off of the bench. As far as forwards go, Aaron Gordon will continue to be the starting power forward and will finally get to play with Jamal Murray after only playing 5 games with him in 2021, and him being your legit 4th option on offense is pretty scary. Jeff Green is still around and will likely see some time as a backup wing, and I personally expect Zeke Nagy to take some significant steps forward this year and become a regular part of the Nuggets rotation. But that leaves the part of the rotation behind Nikola Jokic, which could be filled by Zeke Nagy and Jeff Green, but in my opinion they are both much better at power forward, specifically Jeff Green, but even still so for Zeke Nagy. So who are the true centers on the roster behind Nikola Jokic? It's a 34-year-old DeAndre Jordan, who, to put it kindly, should not be playing anymore in the NBA. He had a great career. He's been very good throughout his prime. But his prime is long gone now, and he should not be playing on regular rotational minutes anymore in the NBA. Arguably shouldn't even be on an NBA roster anymore. And so if the Nuggets do not make any other moves this summer to address this position, the backup center role is the clear weak point on the roster. As much as in my opinion Zeke Nagy is better as a power forward than at center, he very well is a better option than DeAndre Jordan, and so hopefully if they don't add anyone else, the plan is to play Zeke Nagy behind Nikola Jokic and not to give regular minutes to DeAndre Jordan. So with that roster in mind, how competitive can the Denver Nuggets be heading into next season? Well, there's no doubt Denver are going to be an elite offensive team once again, with Murray and MPJ back alongside the reigning back-to-back MVP. They have improved their defense with the additions of Bruce Brown and KCP, and will finally get to have the 4-man core of Jokic, Gordon, MPJ, and Jamal Murray play for significant time, assuming they stay healthy. But 2 questions remain. Can they actually stay healthy, and how good can their defense be? Firstly, with regards to their defense. Yes, their defense has improved from a personnel standpoint over the course of the offseason, and relative to how their defense was a few years ago, it has improved, most importantly with Jokic now not being anywhere near a terrible defender. Their paint defense now has some level of presence, and it is way less of a liability than it was 3 to 4 years ago. Aaron Gordon and KCP now both being in the starting lineup helps significantly, as there is finally more than one positive perimeter defender in the lineup at any given time. But MPJ at his last time playing in the NBA was still a terrible defender. Nikola Jokic is still not an elite rim protector, and as a unit they need to put it all together to be an above average defensive team, which in the regular season they have been over the last couple of years. But they are not that in the playoffs in reference to other playoff teams. And even with an elite offense like Denver have, it is very difficult to find success in the NBA postseason without at least a slightly above average defense relative to your playoff counterparts. Secondly, and undisputedly most importantly, is health. We saw last year that Jokic can carry this team quite far and quite well, even without Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray, as he managed to get a top 6 seed in the West with a roster that honestly should not have been a top 6 seed without Jamal Murray and MPJ. But it is clear there are significant limitations to this roster without them. Jamal Murray is less likely to have lingering effects compared to MPJ, as in today's medical world, it is not some absurd, improbable feat to be able to return from a serious ACL injury and be back at nearly the same, if not the same athletic level, especially at the age of 25. If anything, the bigger concerns are the mental ones, to feel comfortable diving for balls and making explosive cuts and jumps again, something that reportedly had held Jamal Murray back a few months ago, but is something he has got much more comfortable with in recent time. The biggest concern is for Michael Porter Jr., an amazing talent, an elite scorer, was viewed as that way coming out of high school, coming into his draft year. But unfortunately, the biggest setback, time and time again throughout MPJ's basketball career, has been his back, has been that struggle to stay healthy. So with that in mind, it does feel really hard to feel confident in the consistent short-term and long-term health of Michael Porter Jr. The Nuggets are still really good without him, but I struggle to feel confident in this team being a top-tier team in the West with MPJ out of the lineup and Bruce Brown filling into the starting lineup. Now don't get me wrong, Bruce Brown is a great player. I love Bruce Brown. I'll be the first one to tell you that undisputedly. I am a Bruce Brown fan. But MPJ and Bruce Brown are not comparable players, specifically on the offensive end. Defensively, you get better. But losing MPJ, that's not just something you can replace. So with this in mind, how good do I think the Nuggets will truly be next season? I think they're going to be very good once again. I think they are a very competitive team in the Western Conference, but it is hard to bank on the health of MPJ, and the West is very, very good next year, with 8 teams having legitimate chances in my eyes of making a top 4 seed. I think they are on the door waiting to be let into the group, and if MPJ can stay healthy and their defense can be a top 10 defense in the league, then that door is going to fall right over and accept the Nuggets with open arms as title contenders. But those are 2 very, very big ifs, and I need to see those become reality before I can call them title contenders. But one thing is for sure. At least to start the season, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. should be back on the court, and we should have the treat of once again watching one of the most exciting and fun offenses in the NBA. And just maybe, they can stay healthy and show themselves as a title contender.